Uh, Thank you, Maruf. I'm glad you gave Meera some additional time. I may require the same.
I might watch 10 minutes.
Okay, let me just say that Meera has dealt with the larger global picture, and let me deal with the more sort of immediate neighborhood which we have, and what is the measure of, say, economic and integration we can expect to have. Let me start with what we call as SAARC, or South Asia Regional Cooperation. As early as 1989, a plan emerged for us to move to a free trade area in 2010, to a customs union in 2015, and to an economic union in 2020. We diluted that in 2003 and spoke of an economic union in a rather open-ended way at the SAARC summit in Kathmandu. I think one thing we have to realize, and I'll come to the reasons later, the process of economic integration in SAARC has been disappointing compared to our experience with ASEAN and East and Southeast Asia. And this is the reason, one of the reasons why the nature of economic cooperation in SAARC is much slower, to which, as I will explain, we ourselves are partly to blame. The fact of the matter is, energy grids, we talked about grid connectivity. Harry had organized something very useful, and an SAARC institution very helpful is the SAARC Energy Center in Islamabad, which has played a positive role. You do have transnational grids. In North America, Canada, US, and Mexico have grid connectivity, and it's doing very well. And in Europe, they are now talking of smart grids, both within countries and across Europe, which are to come into force sometime by 2020 or 2030. These add to energy efficiency and energy utilization in an optimum manner. Coming to our own neighborhood, let me start with what we have been doing with our immediate neighbors. And since the Prime Minister is today at 10:50, another 20 minutes scheduled to land in Nepal, let me start with Nepal. Nepal, as you all know, has a hydroelectric potential of 83,000 megawatts. Yet, what is utilized is barely 600 megawatts. There have been fancy ideas in Nepal that China would be a great market, but Nepalese rivers flow into India. The direction of flow is India. And I think it's time we both got ahead with moving ahead on this thing. Let me also add that Indian project implementation in Nepal has left much to be desired. Our Nepalese friends are not happy with the way the Kosi project was done, and therefore they do have a sense of grievance. But we do have a very strange situation. Right today, Nepal, with 83,000 megawatts, is actually importing electricity from India. And we are able to ensure that we can export to our neighbors primarily because our own internal demand utilization is so poorly administered. And we run into large transmission, unutilized capacity within India. And even when Mrs. Sushma Swaraj was there recently, we reached an understanding to expedite construction of the 132 kilowatt Kataya Kuasha and the 132 kilowatt Raxaul Parwanipur lines. So again, new lines. More interestingly, Nepal has worked assiduously with securing World Bank financing, and it's well underway. For Nepal India Electricity Transmission and Trade Project, and it is designed to immediately facilitate with 1,000 megawatt capacity, but to immediately facilitate another 100 megawatts from India. So here we have a country sitting on 83,000 megawatts of hydroelectric power, and yet we have been unable to reach agreement. I'm not assigning blame to any party. I think both of us should share the blame in equal measure in this direction. The Pancheshwar project has been hanging in the air for almost 2 decades now, and no progress has been made. Hopefully, there is some good signs because it's not only Nepal, many of our other neighbors have been fed up with the performance of our public sector units. And I'm being very blunt on this because the public sector, say the Power Grid Corporation, has done an incredible job in Afghanistan. It's a record-breaking performance. But the performance in Myanmar and some other countries of our power corporations is deplorable. Within Nepal, for example, Nepal has given out, I think, 28 projects for feasibility studies, largely IPP projects to private companies in India. Some are nearing fruition, but the deal is yet to be clinched. The power purchase agreements and financial closures are yet to be effected. The most notable, where one has seen progress in the private sector, is the GMR project on Pancheshwar for 900 megawatts. But as I said, it's a small part of the 83,000 megawatts. Hopefully, I think it will be a revolution if Mr. Modi's visit can succeed in galvanizing all other projects. This is the case with Nepal. I won't go into much greater detail. Now, I'm already being served warnings, but I should caution. China has a far better reputation in our neighborhood in power projects. And even Bangladesh, which is very interested in cooperation with India, is now seeking Chinese collaboration. An agreement for a 1320 megawatt power plant was recently signed when Sheikh Hasina was in Beijing, and she signed a similar agreement with Tokyo. But there has been progress forward, and I really regard Bangladesh as a very positive sign in our developments because last year we finalized and established a 500 megawatt cross-border interconnection between Berhampur in West Bengal and Beramara in Bangladesh. 250 megawatts of supply have started since the end of last year, though we had promised 500. And the important thing is Tripura and Assam are going to be the game changers because Tripura already, they are developing surplus capacity. They're going to supply 100 megawatts, as the Chief Minister has recently announced. But the potential is much larger. And most important, the game changer has been the attitudinal change in Bangladesh. For the first time, they have provided us transit across their territory without even a formal agreement. You would not have been able to build the Tripura power plants without the facilitation of Bangladesh as efficiently as has been done. Now, if you come in totality to Bangladesh, then the hydroelectric potential is immense. It was agreed a few months ago that India would be allowed to transmit electricity from its northeastern states to Bihar through Bangladesh territory. In exchange, Bangladesh would get a daily minimum of 500 to 1,000 megawatts of additional power supplies. Under the deal, again reached in April this year at the 7th meeting of the Bangladesh-India Joint Committee, we have agreed to connect distribution networks for the transfer of 6,000 megawatts of hydroelectric power from Assam and from to northwestern Bihar via Dinajpur in Bangladesh. So I think these things are moving, network interconnectivity is growing, and the fact we have to remember is we have a huge hydroelectric potential of 50,000 megawatts in our northeastern states. And you need interconnectivity and close cooperation with Bangladesh for transmission of this electricity, which will render the Northeast surplus to other parts of India. Myanmar, briefly, I think Myanmar again is a country we don't properly consider. We have a 1,641 kilometer border with Myanmar. They have a 40,000 megawatt hydroelectric potential, largely on our borders. Yet, and I'm talking on the basis of personal experience, just give you a sense of my bitterness. 1994, I sent Prime Minister Narasimha Rao a proposal for a hydroelectric project on the Chindwin River near our borders with Manipur. That was to be roughly 1800 megawatts. In 1995, that was allotted to the Hydroelectric Power Corporation, whose efficiency is so great that after 20 years, they haven't yet produced a project report. And a Myanmar minister told me in sarcasm, a good friend of mine, he asked me why India is not a member of NATO. And I said, what do you mean we are a non-aligned country? He said, no, I mean India should stand for no action and talk only. Now, if this is the sort of reputation we acquire abroad, and we are acquiring this similar reputation on a transport corridor linking our northeastern states with the Bay of Bengal, India does have a problem. And there's no point in complaining that our diplomacy is not good enough. China is doing better than us. China just delivers more efficiently than we do. And that's a reality we have to recognize. Lastly, Pakistan, Afghanistan. Mira already spoken about a pipeline linking Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. In the meantime, the Chinese have also moved into Afghanistan, and a part of that pipeline is supposed to be hived off from Afghanistan and moved across to Pakistan, China through a short stretch of Pakistani or Pakistan-occupied Kashmir territory. Now, I don't think this project, despite our having signed it, is going to come off easily, because the pipeline traverses through western Afghanistan and through Balochistan, through the tribal areas of Afghanistan, where everybody is shooting everybody else. And I don't see how we can build this pipeline as scheduled by 2017. There's been a lot of talk about the Pakistan, Iran, India pipeline. Now let's be very clear. This pipeline goes through some of the most volatile areas of Pakistan, which means Balochistan, a place where Pakistani pipelines are being blown up every second day. Now, if I was an India or an international investor, I would not think twice, I would think thrice before taking a pipeline through. More so if there have been occasions when the Pakistanis have made it clear that in the event of tensions with India, the security of gas supplies cannot be taken for granted. What is then the answer? The answer to my mind is keep this option open till better times come, or jab achhe din aa jate hain, as is the present narrative. But what is possible is a undersea pipeline from Iran to India. This is very feasible. Studies have been done. There is already, pipeline will cost about $4.5 billion, but the potential for undersea pipelines is immense. And this is a part of the sea which the Indian Navy can securely guarantee quite substantially. So as I said, keep the other option open. And I just want to say the difficulties of pipeline agreements through Pakistan. When we dropped out, and we dropped out for good reasons, financial reasons, they went ahead with the Iran-Pakistan pipeline. Now, Iran invested a huge amount of money up to the Pakistan border. Suddenly, Pakistan said sorry. The answer very simple. Agreement was signed by President Zardari, who's a Shia, has never been invited to Saudi Arabia. And when he was succeeded by Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, the Saudis and the Americans have turned the screws. And a project where heavy penalties will have to be paid by Pakistan for non-implementation, they have nevertheless evoked force majeure and called closure. So as I see it, I see extended and very promising signs for even having a grid network across our eastern borders, which will be mutually beneficial to all concerned. I would keep, and that can be a success story, but the forum for that is not SAARC. SAARC is going to include Pakistan, and then everything's going to come to a halt when you talk of the entire region. But we do have another regional organization which meets regularly at the level of heads of government, which is called BIMSTEC, or the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Technical and Economic Cooperation. Now, this includes Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India, Myanmar, and Thailand. Now, that is the area of energy flow which we need to give priority to. What I'm suggesting in this forum is shift energy cooperation primacy from SAARC to the BIMSTEC, get about being real, and in the meantime, I would suggest we would have to wait for Achhe Din to come for our western borders, because despite much of the optimism we have seen, I don't think the Pakistan military or the Lashkar-e-Taiba are going to permit the construction or any energy cooperation between India and Pakistan. I hope I am wrong, and I hope Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif prevails, but I've generally not been wrong. Thank you.